Hello everyone, Xanaro Gaming coming at y'all with another video, and in today's video I'm finally done compiling all the data in the notepad notebook on all the recent tournaments that have taken place over the last 2 weeks. Like I said, I am gonna do the state of the meta report videos like this once every 7 to 10 kind of ish days, like a week and a half. And for some reason, this has been a very busy week and a half. The community has done a really good job of uploading all their tournaments to the exburst.dev. This is definitely the most tournaments I've had to go through at a single time in this time span. So instead of going through all of these different tournaments that are listed on the site here like I normally do and show all the topping lists, I am only going to just do the pie chart video. If you do want to see me do the video where I go through each of these different tournaments and I kind of just go through and just show y'all all the deck topping lists and what decks we're playing, let me know down in the comments and I will try to get that out. But this is a very busy week with 2 different sets coming out, trying to get all these deck profile videos out for everyone. And this is definitely, I think, the most important videos I do are these state of the meta reports, because I think it gives everyone in the community, from casual players and their local tournaments, a chance to upload their results, and then some of these bigger tournaments in here. One thing to note in this compiling of data, there were 2 really big events that took place. There was the Draw 3 tournament that had a lot of players in it. I think 64, something crazy. A lot of people played for that one. I did not get to make it. And then there were a couple of different tournaments that pushed 20, 22, 18, and 17. So we did have some pretty decent, tournaments to take from this data. One thing I do want to show before I go into this is going to, be just a little bit, I don't know if you guys can be able to see this or not. This is kind of giving away what the pie chart has. This is the data I have. Wow, that's not seeable at all. Wow, that's a little too much now. Can I manage this? Anyways, I just wanted to show some decks do have a lot of tops, right? And then over this time period, how you can see I have 5, 1, 1, 1. This is actually in reverse, the recent tournaments to the last. I do think that you can see how relevant certain decks are throughout a particular meta. I'll zoom this in so you guys can see, right? So this is starting from, the earliest dates onwards, and then this, 5 over here being the most recent tournaments that happened. The tournaments did go from 5-8 to 5-18, ending on that Draw 3 tournament. So you can see here, Purple Code got a few tops at the beginning of, when I did this, into up to a really competitive tournament. Purple Code players showing up in force, right? So you can see when people go to pick certain decks to play in big tournaments, some of these decks may be more relevant than the others, where you can see Purple Bleach constantly has tops every week, one deck here or there, and you can show that people really love their Purple Bleach decks. And throughout this time period, just constantly getting 7 different tournaments when we're going over, I think 16 different tournaments that happened, or not quite that many, but it was a lot of different tournaments. And you can see here just which decks keep topping throughout a steady week, being the Purple Bleach decks, the yellow Demonslayer brother sister decks constantly getting some tops, the blue JJK maybe not showing out in numbers in the big tournament as often as they did, but consistently throughout the weeks, 1 1 1 1 1 1 2 for the big tournament. So it just shows how I wanted to show this data that I compiled so people could just see how often decks are playing and being top, as opposed to when people go to these really competitive tournaments and they only really want to try to play what they deem some of the better meta decks. And you can see here a yellow Onepunchman always showing up throughout the weeks, and then the blue SAO Kirito deck showing up very consistently. One thing to note is I am very happy to see that the yellow SAO decks, both the Knights and the Goddess decks, were pretty consistent throughout the weeks as well, which is a great thing to see, that it's not just the blue and green. And to be completely honest, green kind of was a letdown. But with all that premise, we are going from the 5-8 Midgard Gaming. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different tournaments is what this data is compiling, and it is from the 8th through the 18th. If you need to be specific and you want to be able to use this data from there. But let's get into the pie chart. Sorry for delaying. I did want to get a lot of premise out of the way. Let's see if we can get this baby zoomed in a little more. That is perfect for everyone. Here is the pie chart, right? Very, very healthy colors going all the way around. We have so many different topping deck lists. I think that the total of the topping deck list was 18 different unique decks are going to be on this pie chart, which I think is a great thing to see just over, you know, a 2-week span of time. Just how, you know, good the game is in a, you know, a healthy state. There's so many different decks you could play right now, and if your favorite deck isn't on this list, do not fret. I do believe that just about every deck outside of, you know, a handful, maybe 5 or 6 decks, do have a place to show up in some of these tournaments, right? So don't let what people say about the meta discourage you about your decks, right? But the big winners of the day, or from these weekends, is going to be the purple code. Now, I do think from that data I showed y'all before earlier, we had a lot of purple code decks do really, really well in that draw 3 tournament. But if you look at the other weekends, we had 5 of those purple code decks top, and throughout the other, you know, 12 different tournaments, there was only 3 different purple code decks at top, right? So I do think in a bigger, you know, tournament setting, the purple code deck is going to be one of the ones that's a little more favored to do well throughout a big tournament, and we do see that happening here from the data. We have 7 or 8 different purple code decks that topped, right? So definitely the big winner of this time period, mainly from the draw 3 tournament. I think we all know that purple code is one of the best decks in the game, and I do not think that it's going anywhere. It's really, really strong, and it's really just such a fun deck to play too, right? Like, it's not like, you know, brain dead to play. It does take a little bit of strategy from you, knowing kind of what to do and how to answer certain boards, but it is just so super consistent of a deck. That's why you see it staying on the top of these pie charts. Now, with that being said, in second place, we do have a tie of decks, which is, you know, the consistent blue decks, right? The blue SAO, just to state, purple code got 8 tops. And then in second place, there was a 3-way tie between blue Sword Art Online, which I'm really happy to see that, because I did think that that deck is really, really strong, and I have been telling a lot of people in the community, I do think that it is the premier aggressive deck, as much as people do want to say that maybe the Speedo Sound Sonic is, or some of these other decks. I do think when blue Sword Art Online high rolls, it is almost unbeatable with the amount of pressure it can put on you. So 7 blue Sword Art Onlines, 7 of the blue JJK, and 7 purple Bleach Top. So these have all been really consistent decks throughout the state of the game and the health of the game as it's been going on. I think it is good to see that these decks are still doing really, really well, all just getting edged out by purple code, but have all been, you know, big they've been in the meta for a while, like blue JJK and purple Bleach. I do think with the Bleach set coming out soon, a lot more people have been jumping back to their Bleach decks, and throughout the data, I was able to see that, you know, there has been more participation on the purple Bleach decks, which, you know, shows that the deck, when it does get played, it's still a very, very consistent deck. I do think one of the big winners is the blue Sword Art Online deck. I think a lot of people expected blue JJK to do really well, which it has. It did have a lot of tops in these tournaments, but I do think that the blue Sword Art Online is the big winner from the Sword Art Online decks, because I think a lot of people were saying that the green was going to be a huge problem over here, and I do think that it is still a really solid top of the meta deck, but it did not have as much great showings throughout the last 2 weeks. That is all. Now, going on to the, that was the 3-way tie for second place. In 4th place alone, we do have the yellow Demonslayer brother-sister deck, bringing up 8.3% of the pie chart. And it is a lone in itself, with the fact that it got 5 tops throughout this, you know, span, and it is, you know, a really, really good aggro deck. We've seen it be really consistent. It's a really strong aggro deck. It got 5 tops throughout these, you know, last 2 weeks, and it is such a, you know, really strong, fun deck that people love to play. I do think that some of the issue and consistencies of the deck is trying to find you know, your raid targets. I've seen a lot of games that I watched on the streams, a lot of people just not finding the raids, but it is still consistent enough to get these tops, and it is powerful enough to really put your opponent out of the game with its aggressive plays and bringing characters back and forth. I do think it is maybe a little less consistent than the blue sword art online, but and also doesn't have as big as a high roll, right? Which I do think that puts it as a little bit. If I had to put the premier aggro deck, it would be the blue SAO, and then like that would be like the main one, and then this one would be one notch below it, just below it in what it can do and how consistent it is. But this deck is not going anywhere. The deck is still really, really good and really, really strong. Happy to see that it was able to get 5 tops. So shout out to all the yellow Demonslayer brother, sister, Tanjiro, and Nezuko decks, right? Going down the line, I think the biggest surprise of the entire, you know, this span is these 4 yellow SAO goddess decks, right? I love this deck. It was, you know, my favorite deck to build from the set. I was really, really pumped for it. I did think that, you know, taking your life would mean too much for you to, you know, like overcome, right? I really thought that the deck maybe would not show out this well because of that, but the deck is really, really consistent. It is really, really powerful, and now it's not quite as aggressive as some of these aggro decks we see, but it does have some capabilities of some really interesting deck building where people are putting the Yu-Gi-Ohs in the deck, and I do think that help gives the deck some defensive capabilities that it was much needing. And since I've added him to my deck as well, I do feel like the deck is a little more consistent and does have a little more stay power and not getting walled out by your opponent. But it does feel really, really good in this deck when you can see your lines, get to your 3 life thresholds pretty quickly and really rush your opponent down, and then, you know, just really good deck. And it has the yellow color trigger, which is really, really strong. This is definitely the surprise of the whole weekend for me, is that yellow SAO goddess deck has been doing so well, and I hope that more people pick this deck up because it is really, really fun. And it is cool to play with and against, right? Like when you see your opponent taking your life, it kind of changes what you want to do to the deck, right? Because you may want to be a little more aggressive. And I do think that this deck and some of these aggro decks are showing why some of these, you know, build-up decks have been getting pushed down and how often they've been able to top. Because any one of these decks, you know, the yellow SAO deck, the yellow Demonslayer deck, the blue SAO deck, any of these 3 decks can really rush down these green ramp decks that want to try to get time in the game, and these elect decks don't allow them to do so. But being tied with them in the same amount of wins with 4 is going to be the yellow One-Punch-Man. This deck really is so good and so consistent. It has a good high roll, being able to do the double final 2 Saitamas down the board. I think that happens like once every, you know, 4 games. I see that on average. Like a quarter of the games, people are high rolling with this deck, and even if you don't high roll, the deck is so consistent and strong, and it has so many good Genos cards to keep you in the game before the Saitamas get you there. It is, I think, a, you know, quintessential like good Union Arena deck. I really do think that if I had to pick one deck that was like a solid Union Arena deck that people need to pick up and play, has some, you know, early raids, has some, you know, good different keyword effects, has a good win potential, and it has a good closeout card, I would recommend the yellow One-Punch-Man Saitama, because I do think that it is a good deck, it's a solid deck, and it's great for new people getting into the game. If you're looking for a great deck, I definitely recommend the yellow One-Punch-Man Saitama. Maybe feels bad to play against sometimes though when people do high roll. That is the one thing I don't like about the deck, is that, you know, when people high roll with it, there's just no way you win. Like they just kill you, and it doesn't feel great. But going down from there, that was the 2 decks that had 4 wins. Coming up down here, we do have 2 different decks with 3 wins, and it is going to be the green SAO deck that is going to be the Kirito and the Xenon deck that a lot of people were really, really hyped for. I do think that the deck is really, really strong, and I do think that it is a deck that is one of the top decks, even though that it's not as showing as these other kind of like 5 or 6 decks here that have the majority of the pie chart. It is in definitely this other tier of percentage of topping, and I think it has to do with the fact that it's definitely the most consistent green ramp deck. It really is. There's so much search power, there's so many ways for you to stack your deck, see the cards that you need, but it does need to get to that 6-7 energy spot, which does not always happen for you when you're running against some of these really aggro decks in the game. And I think that that's why the showing of this deck is probably a little lower than most people in the community were probably thinking it was going to do, right? I think that from my understanding, from what I was taking from all the servers, and I'm in a lot of them trying to, like, you know, get data and see what people are saying, this deck was supposed to be the next big boogeyman, right? Like, we had green One-Punch-Man, and a lot of people were like, oh, green SAO is going to come in and just destroy the meta. It's going to be one of the best decks in the game. And you can see here, it does have that potential, but it is a little slower. And with how aggressive some of these decks can be, I think that you can have a good time against it. Now, when this deck is rolling and it does start pressuring you, it is one of the harder decks to come back in the game. It controls your board so well. It pushes pressure to get impacts and snipe and really close out the game. So once this deck does get going and they start clearing your board, it's going to keep happening, and you really can't keep up with the value and the board clear and the damage that this deck can do, and it is a really solid deck. With that being said, though, yellow Sword Art Online Knights deck, the Integrity Knights, has the same amount of top as this deck. 3 different tops throughout all these tournaments. I think that this is another great deck. I could not have spoke higher praise about this deck when I did the set breakdown for Sword Art Online, and I was talking about some of the decks to watch out for, and it was this Sword Art Online Integrity Knights deck. It is a great toolbox deck. It does a little bit of everything that you want. It has a lot of great defensive capabilities, and it is yellow, so it gets that yellow color trigger. And if you've never played against this deck, it is really, really strong, and you have to worry about how consistent the deck is, able to stop your impact negates, able to boost their board up, able to have a lot of different raid targets, and to be able to, you know, curtail what they want to do in a game to combat what you're doing to them. I do think that this is an amazing deck. I think a lot of people should try this deck, and I'm glad to see it did so well. It was definitely one of the hot takes I took, saying that this deck was so good, and I think I actually, when I gave my grades, I gave it the same amount of power grade in that set review as the green SAO deck, and it's cool to see that both of the decks are performing well. Maybe, you know, this deck, the yellow SAO Knights deck, performing a little bit better, and then maybe the green SAO deck not performing quite to what people were expecting. Now, going down the line here, we do have 3 different decks that all have 2 different tops, that being 2 Hashiros, 2 green Code Suzakus, and 2 red One-Punchman Speedo Sound Sonic, right? The one I want to touch on first is going to be the red One-Punchman Speedo Sound Sonic. I do think that a lot of people realize that if they're going to be playing the red One-Punchman deck, it needs to just be the Speedo Sound Sonic. The Garo is really, really good, and maybe, you know, a little more consistent at what it can do. But in this meta at the moment that we're seeing with all these other aggro decks, the Speedo Sound Sonic is a little more fragile in how it needs to do its plays and see certain cards, where a lot of these decks, that if they break what you're doing, Purple Bleach clears off a lot of your cards, the blue JJK having the color trigger to bounce or bounce your characters back and making you have to play them down, all these different things that go on. I think that, you know, the deck is a little more fragile, but the high roll and the speed of this deck, with the namesake of the card that you run in it, it is still a very scary aggro deck, and I do think that it is in a good spot right now, and I do think that you need to put time into this deck to do really well with it, because just like, you know, the other aggro decks with the yellow brother sister Demonslayer and the blue SAO, you do have to know your lines, and I do think that the red One-Punchman Speedo Sound Sonic is a little more fragile than the other 2 aggro decks, and I think that's why it doesn't have as consistent as a showing, but I do believe that the same power is there to close out games. Now, going to the green Suzaku Code deck, this deck picked up in the last couple weekends, right? Like you saw on the data that I showed earlier, it did just recently get those 2 tops. I'll bring this over again so everyone can see it, if I could get it to minimize. Come over, please. There we go. It got those 2 tops in the last tournament of the, you know, this time period that I did, the Draw 3 tournament. It got those last 2 tops there, so it wasn't a deck that was performing consistently, you know, throughout the weeks, but I do think that in a big tournament, when you're expecting to see certain decks, I do think that green Suzaku does really well into purple Code. Me and one of my other testing buddies, it's about a 50-50 matchup. If anything, I think that it is probably a little more favored on the green Code side. If I had to, you know, say both players were equal in what they were doing and they know what both decks do, which is one of my buddies, who I test a lot with these decks, is he does know the lines. And if you do that and you know what you're supposed to do, which is mainly sitting on the 6-drop. Sit on the 6-drop until they play their, their Gawains out, and then get the Suzaku back. Now go on to your 8-drop, so then you can clear one of the mechs. I do think that is the line. If you needed me to, if you needed some tips on how to beat that matchup, I do think that is the line. Try to not raid your 8s until you have to clear those mechs out, because your mech is the way that you clear their mechs off. And once you do that, now they are a little bit more broken. And it is good to see that the green code Suzaku did so well in that tournament, because that is the same tournament the purple codes had a big showing in, right? But it is a really, really solid deck. Definitely really good. Like you can see, I do think that the green SAO is the premier green deck at the moment, followed up by the Suzaku, and we'll get to the other ones later. But once again, everyone keeps sleeping on it, but we did have 2 Hashira decks top throughout these couple of weeks. And I've been saying it over and over and over again. And one of my best friends, who is always at our local card shop with this deck, he also believes in it. This deck can win against any deck, right? Now, you do have to see certain lines, certain cards, and certain outs, but if you know kind of what you're going into, especially some of these bigger tournaments, then you can kind of curtail the toolbox for the cards to see the lines that you really need to see to clear those boards out. And I think that the Hashira deck is one of the coolest decks, that where it is all about the person playing it and how they're building their deck into the meta. And that's why I think we will always see at least one Hashira every now and then getting a top in tournaments, because it is a deck that can do that, and it really, rewards the deck builder and player in it. Cannot speak highly enough of the Hashira deck. Now, coming on the bottom here, we do have a lot of different decks that got 1 topping each. Down here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. And there's a lot of them, which is a good thing, right? That means that all of these decks have some kind of way to live in the meta at the moment and really do some cool stuff. We have 1 purple hunter toolbox deck, which is definitely one I want to talk about. 1 green onepunchman Saitama, which is probably one of the big disappointments. 1 Kurapika, which we always see at least 1 Kurapika. I do think that Kurapika is in such a tough spot, and he's not getting support, and I'm really disappointed about it. But the deck that won with this one was a very interesting deck list. 1 yellow JJK Gojo deck, 1 metal bat deck, and then 1 Demonslayer red trio, kind of Tanjiro, Inosuke, the whole trio deck. That's what that one is, right? I do think that this deck is really cool. It could do a lot of different things. The red trio deck, it's really, really fun to play, and I think that if you have a list that works for you, you can really make it far in a lot of these tournaments. But it is deck dependent, and it is a little fragile, needing to see these other pieces to do really well in it, right? We also have the green One-Punch-Man Metal Bat. Shout out to Joey for doing this. He really believes in the Metal Bat. We mean back and forth between how good Metal Bat is. I do think that he is honest, and I'm honest that Metal Bat is a really good deck. Is it one of the best decks in the format? I don't think so. But just like the Hashira deck, the Metal Bat deck really rewards players who take the time with the deck, know your deck build, know your different lines, know what you're supposed to do in certain moments, and this deck really does just wall out a lot of bodies, because you're able to press, a lot of 3-4K bodies on the board and just get value over and over again, and you really just keep showing your opponent, it's like, Renji Rush but better, right? Because you just keep throwing out 4Ks. Can you answer this? If you don't, now you're having to take a damage or give me a body. It is a really good deck, and it is one of those decks, this and the Hashira deck, just show how good the game of Union Arena is, because these decks like this that a lot of people don't believe are, top tier meta decks, can do really well if you believe in them. Now, the yellow JJK Gojo deck, also a deck I want to talk about a lot too, because I do think that this deck is in a good spot in the meta at the moment. I am maybe a little surprised to see more people not playing it. There was only 3 people playing this deck throughout all these tournaments, 1 to get a top. So if you look at the conversion rate on that, that's actually pretty high, right? So if you want a deck to, that I think does really well in the meta right now, and you want to pick it up, and it only gets better soon once we get that volume 2, it is going to be Gojo, because being able to tap down some of these aggressive decks bodies and not make them want to, get rid of them and send them away, because then they'll have to go to the removal. It is a really good deck, and it has the yellow color trigger, and it only gets more support. I am a little disappointed in Kurapika showings, but I understand that the deck is starting to get phased out, and you know, Kurapika does do some really cool stuff, but I do think that he needs a little more support. We know we're not getting another raid target, which is unfortunate. We are getting a couple other cards that help the deck, but that is really more of a Gone and Friend support for the deck, and I do think that Kurapika is like that gatekeeper of like what decks top, right? Like you got to be able to beat a Kurapika deck, and if you can consistently, you know, provide enough pressure to beat one or out the bodies that Kurapika plays, I think that that shows that your deck is in a good spot to really, you know, do well against some of these other really good decks. I still believe in Kurapika. I will keep playing to the end of the days, but he does need help, and we're not getting it. The Green Punch Man, Green One Punch Man Saitama deck, I think is probably the biggest disappointment for a lot of people maybe on this pie chart, because it is, I think, what a lot of people consider one of the most powerful decks, but a lot of people know how to play against these One Punch Man decks now, and it is really just from the showing here from all these aggro decks, it is rush them down, don't let them get to that. If you had to sacrifice your energy lines to not get into your raids later, you really don't care about that, because you're trying to kill the one Saitama deck, take all the life out before they're able to play that big body on the board. And a lot of people are realizing now too, the more you can mess with their energy line and get rid of those kings early and often, then the deck struggles to get that ramp up. And it has gone down a little bit in participation rate, but it's not like crazy numbers. It's not like, it's still, a lot of people are playing it, but I think that a lot of people know how to play against it now, but it is still a really scary deck, and I don't see it going anywhere. Now, the last deck on this list that I want to talk about that got a top was a purple hunter toolbox deck, and shout out to whoever this was in the tournaments that got this top. I love this deck. It gets more support. Big shout out, because I got a lot of hate on that, like, good decks in Union Arena, and I put this one there, and a lot of people were like, that purple hunter toolbox deck is trash. Well, it's clearly not, because someone probably watched that video and did really well with it to show everyone up that, you know, the purple hunter toolbox deck is really strong, because you get so much value with the Crollo, and if you see it early and often, you can really put some pressure on your opponent and control their board. And this deck is also getting a lot more support in the next set for Hunter x Hunter, and it will be a really good deck. This is the pie chart. I will zoom out a little bit so we can kind of get a better idea of it. We have a lot of different, you know, topping deck lists. Obviously, we see a lot of the good like long stay decks in the meta that have always been here, and a lot of random showings. And I just want to talk about the game. I know this is a longer video. These videos are always longer anyway, so hopefully you guys don't care to hear me ramble, but Union Arena is probably one of the healthiest meta games, like state of a healthy game that I've ever seen. I've played a lot of different card games. My brother you know, opened up a card shop for us, and I play a lot of the games. I play almost every game, and I do have to say that Union Arena is in such a great place. The community is awesome. The IPs are great. I do think that the card game is more competitive than people try to give it credit for, and this is exactly what you want to see in a card game. Any pie chart that looks like this to show, you know, topping decks in the card game, I don't know a whole lot of other ones. You know, if you go to any of Eggman's events or all these other channels that do these pie charts for other games, you see that there's usually like 2 or 3 decks that take up 50% of the meta, and then there's a small corner of like 30-something% of like 2 or 3 other decks, and that is how most games are. But this game is so beautiful, being able to have, you know, I forget the like the guy who has the colorful coat, but the pie chart is beautiful, right? There's so many different colors for us to look at, and that means that the game is in a healthy state. And I think with more IPs that come out, we want this pie chart to just look crazier and crazier, and I could not be happier with the game. But these videos are a lot of work. Please leave the video a like. Please sound off in the comments down below. And for everyone that always follows the channel and watches these videos, please give the channel a share. Try to get more people to subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it. I have so much fun doing these, but these videos are a lot of work, but they are, you know, so, I think, so important for the community to see all this stuff, and I will keep doing these forever. As long as I'm doing this channel, I will keep doing these videos, because I know how important it is for people to see data like this, and it's so much fun for me to like go through it and look like, oh, that deck got a top here, or that deck got a top here. Very interesting to see, you know, just like how cool this game is. I love it a lot. I have so much fun doing it. But like I said, leave the video a like, subscribe to the channel. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.